Hello and welcome to the Goldberry Artisans podcast. My name is Emily and I'm coming to you from the gorgeous and today sunny and mostly warm state of Maine. This is a podcast mostly about knitting, but also about me trying to learn some other crafts and doing all of that on a budget. You can find show notes for this episode at goldberryartisans.com. I'm on Instagram as Goldberry Artisans, and I'm on Ravelry as Emily Ruth B. And if you've been watching my podcast for a while, I'm finally back outside. When I first started recording my podcast last summer, close to a year ago at this point. I think I started in July. But I recorded all my podcast episodes outside, and I'm so happy it's finally warm enough to do so. And actually, I have Gridley, our family's dog, is down beside me. I chose my location today based on how far his lead will go, because he would have been very sad if I came outside and sat down out of reach. It'll adjust. So yeah, today I have knitting, a very small amount of embroidery, and I'm going to be talking about some of the books that really helped me when I was first starting to knit. So, let's get into it. First up, what I have off the needles, I have one finished object, and I did show this off in my vlog, but it hasn't been finished for very long. This is my Evermore cowl. The pattern is the Bittersweet cowl by Carrie, Bostick, Hoge. And as you could first see, this is my 3-needle bind off. You can see there's definitely a ridge. I looked up a tutorial once about 5 years ago of how to do a 3-needle bind off, and I think I did it wrong because this is what the right side of the fabric looks like, and this is what it looks like on the wrong side of the fabric. So I should have reversed what I did so that the stockinette stitch, the V's would be on the outside and the purl bumps would be on the inside. But oh well. I mean, a lot of cowls that are knit or sewn have seams anyway, so I'll just put that in the back. It's not going to bother me. But just a note for next time to actually look up a tutorial to make sure I'm doing a 3-needle bind off correctly. Because I've realized I don't really do them very often. Most things that need to be joined, I've typically grafted or done mattress stitch to seam it together or something. But yeah. So I like this bright color. At first I wasn't totally sure, just because I don't wear a lot of pink, but I think the color is dark enough. It's not like a neon pink. The color is dark enough. I love dark reds and purples. So I think this will be, I'll wear it once. I mean, I might still wear it this spring. It's only early May and it's Maine. So chances are I will probably have a chance to wear it. So that's my only finished object. I have a new cast on. I actually just cast on for this yesterday. I was going to an author event at my library. It was the first time I'd ever gone to an author event, but I'd actually read a book that she had written. The author was Monica Wood. She wrote the book The 1 in a Million Boy, which was published last year and has just exploded. That's the book of hers that I have read. She's been writing for a long time. My mother had read her book when we were the Kennedys, and so we went together, and I didn't have any good portable knitting because I have a pair of socks and the needles. But if you watch my last vlog, you might remember I talked about how I discovered that one of the cats had peed on the outside of the basket where I store my works in progress. And I think, so now the bag that my socks were in smells, which means that the socks themselves smell. There's nothing on the bag or on the socks, but just being in that for a while, I think just made them to smell. And so I do not enjoy working on those, and especially not taking them out in public because they don't smell good. So what I would probably have to do is wash it. But the problem is it's a skein of sock yarn. It's not, I don't know. I don't know what the best way to do that is, or just deal with it while I'm knitting on it and then wash them when they're done. I don't know. So I haven't dealt with that yet. So I didn't have a portable knitting project. But I had recently purchased this yarn from Knit Picks. This is their Felici worsted base in their Time Traveler colorway, based on the scarf that I believe it's the 4th Doctor. Oh, I should know this. Tom Baker's Doctor. Based on the long, very famous knitted scarf that he wears. And I had been eyeing their because their original Felici yarn is a sock yarn. And I'd always wanted to get the Time Traveler colorway, but I just never had, or because they don't have a lot of their Felici colors in stock a lot, and especially now this one, it's very popular. So then when stop, grid light, no. Feeding bark. But when they introduced Felici worsted, I saw that they had Time Traveler, and I just really wanted to knit with this colorway. So even though I would have preferred the sock yarn since they didn't have it, I went with the worsted weight yarn. And when I was on the page for this on their website, a cowl pattern popped up that they had published called the Time Traveler Cowl, which is a very simple cowl just with some all over cables, the same cable over and over again, unlike my sweater that I'll show you in a minute. So I cast that on. But this seems a little small for a cowl. The knitting pattern calls for size 6 needles. I actually am using size 7, which is 4.5 millimeters, and it seems quite small. Now, I mean, it is stretchy, but I just thought it would be a bit bigger. But honestly, after I'd cast this on, because I cast this on like in the car on the way there, I had been thinking like, well, will I really wear a cowl? Would I wear a hat more? So I was kind of torn. But now I'll keep knitting on it. If it turns out it's too small for a cowl, this looks like I could easily turn it into a hat. Or if it turns out to be a cowl size, great, I have the cowl I cast on. This is, I forget what the fiber content of the yarn is. I don't have the label with me. It's superwash merino. I don't remember if it's mixed with anything else. So the yarn is definitely very soft, not too plasticky, which can sometimes be the case with superwash merinos. It's nice and soft and round and squishy. See if you can see the yarn. Very, I mean, not super tightly spun, not super bouncy, but I love the vivid colors, and I think the color changes are really good. Like they're not muddy at all. It just goes, there's like, let's see if I can even find one. Here. If you look like right at those pearl dots right there, you can kind of see where the purple goes into the brown, but that's it. So yeah, the color changes are nice and sharp, and I still definitely want to try to hunt down some Time Traveler sock yarn. I'll have to look on Ravelry, see if anybody is destashing any. So that is my new cast on. I had been trying to limit myself to 3 projects on the needles, like my sweater, the vest that I'm working on, and one other project. But with my socks kind of in hibernation right now because they stink, I cast on this cowl. I figured this is a small enough project that it's not going to really detract from my other ones very much, because I have a couple of shawl patterns that I'm dying to cast on, and I have the yarn ready for them, yarns that I've never used before and I'm excited to use. But I know that if I cast on a big project like a shawl, that's definitely going to distract me from my other big projects, and then it will, when I do that, it just feels like it takes me forever to get anything done, because I'm kind of trying to divide my time equally between 3 major projects, but then the progress isn't really being made on any of them. So yeah, so basically I'm trying to do better at project management. I've never been someone with tons of works in progress. Like, I don't have a whole giant basket full, but I do have a few that, like, I have a colorwork mitten that I knit the pattern multiple times, but I never got around to making the second one. I have a few things like that. Ridley, hey. He's whining. Most of my family is over at playing at the church right now. Like, there's a playground and a basketball hoop and stuff at our church, and he can hear them. So he's very sad that he's not over there playing with them. Do knock over my tripod. I love you, but there will be consequences. Yeah. So that was my new cast on. I wish he was a lap dog so you guys could see him. He's so cute. But if you want more dog, I did talk about him in my vlog if you haven't watched that. I'm trying to figure out because with the vlogs, I really enjoy doing them, but then sometimes I almost feel like I have to repeat a lot of the information that I talked about my projects. But I don't want that to get too repetitive for people who watch both. But for some reason, I just assumed that a lot of people only watch one or the other, but I don't think that's the case. So let me know if you want me to repeat a lot of the information that I give in my vlogs about, like, my progress on certain things, or like mistakes that I made or things I ran into with the projects. Yeah, just let me know if you would like me to repeat all that information. Okay, my next work in progress that I will share, this is my Buttercup Vest, inspired by Buttercup from The Princess Bride. The pattern is the Brookdale Vest by Elizabeth Smith from the book Main Knits. So it's hard to show because you're supposed to put the different sections, like I've divided for the fronts and the back at this point, and you're supposed to put them on different cables, but I think I was knitting it during our evening service at church one day, and so I didn't have extra cables with me, so they're all on the same cable. So this is the progress, this is the back, and then this is one of the fronts. So right now, I knit this is the arm section, and then this, you put the stitches on here for the shoulder, and then you continue knitting this for up around the neck. So it's mostly just the rice stitch panel. So this is nice, mindless knitting. The stitch pattern is super, super easy. And because on the wrong side rows, you just knit all of the stitches. And then the right side, it's like a twisted rib. So super easy stitch pattern. But it is getting a bit too big now to really carry around. Although at the Monica Wood event that I went to last night, I had my knitting in my bag, and I wasn't really sure because, like, there were a lot of people there. I wasn't really sure. Sometimes knitting in public at an event like that, especially when I was the youngest person there by a bit. But then a lady a couple rows up from me, I saw her pull something out of her bag, and I caught it briefly in the air. It was definitely like a sweater or a large shawl or something that she was knitting, and I could see by the motion of her arms that she was knitting. So I figured it was safe. If somebody else was knitting, I was good. So all the progress on that cowl was driving to the library and working on it there. So this is but for me, this is too big, really, for it to be portable. But if you remember, I did order a couple extra skeins of yarn because my gauge was so much smaller than what the pattern called for, and the yarn I had would have been just barely enough if my gauge had matched. So I bought 2 more skeins of yarn, and I'm definitely glad I did because I'm on my last, this would have been my last skein if I hadn't ordered more. And I'm not even done with one of the fronts. So I'm definitely glad that I bought those couple of extra skeins. And this is living. I know I've talked about this before. It's living in my trundle bag from Madder Root. A couple of the skeins of yarn came out when I went to pull it out. Oh no, this is not my last skein. It's my second to last skein of what I originally purchased. But anyway, my trundle bag from Madder Root. It's nice and roomy. I can fit. So right now I have like 3.5 skeins of yarn in here, plus my vest, and it still has a bit of room at the top. So then I've actually, a couple of times when I've brought this out different places to knit, I've just put the clip on it and just use this like as a purse, and I've put, you know, like my phone and my wallet and whatever in here, and it's worked well. And I can fit the main knits book in here. It does get bent a bit just because it's a bag, so I don't like to keep it in here for long periods of time, but this bag is super, super roomy. Plus I love that it's from a Maine company, and I'm knitting a project from Maine Knits in it, which is super cool. Oh, and I did want to talk a little bit about the yarn. It is Knit Picks Wool of the Andes, which I had never used before, so I figured a vest would be a good time to use it, because I know some people have used it for sweaters, but I just figured a vest, I could see how it held up, especially like underneath the arms, which is a big pilling spot on sweaters, so I could see that without quite committing to a full sweater's quantity of yarn and the time it takes to knit a sweater. So this is what the yarn looks like. It's nice. I love how heathered it is. Like from far away, it just looks like a medium chestnutty brown, but from close up you can see the reds and yellows mixed in there. This colorway is amber heather. Okay. So it's 100% Peruvian Highland wool, 110 yards to 50 grams, which makes it a worsted weight. It's not soft, but it's not as rustic as a lot of 100% non-superwashables. So, and I definitely enjoy working on it. It's easy to use. I don't find it scratchy. So yeah, I'll keep you updated on how it holds up once my vest is completed. I do also want to get back to talking more about the yarns that I'm using, not just mentioning the yarns, but talking about how they behave or what they feel like. Because that's one thing with knitting podcasts, is that you can see the yarn, but you can't feel it. The same thing with trying to buy yarn online, you can't feel it. Yeah, I just want to give more details about the yarn so you can get a better picture of what the yarn is really like if you wanted to try it. Hello, family. Gridley could hear you guys over there. He was very sad that he was over here and everybody was over there once he could hear them.
Hello, darling.
That's why I sat here so that he could come sit next to me, but that wasn't enough for him. I know, it's gotten a bit colder. The sun went away. The other project that I have on the needles is my Waking Up the Flowers sweater. I love it so much. You can hear my little sisters in the background. Oh my goodness. And when I stop to look at it like this, I love it. So this is the back, and I need to knit, I think, 8.25 inches, like from here, from the end of the armhole decreases and bind offs. Although I need to figure that out, because I did the armhole bind offs for the size that I'm doing. I got to this point and then it said to bind off 1 stitch for the next however many rows until I got down to a certain number of stitches. Well, I was already at that certain number of stitches after just the first armhole bind offs. So I think I need to go into the pattern and figure out, just look at the schematics for how deep that needs to be, rather than just going on the, this many inches from this armhole decrease. Just look at the schematics to see how deep the part from the beginning of the armhole decreases to the end is supposed to be. But it's close. It's definitely, I can feel it. It's getting there. I think from the last time that I recorded a podcast, I believe I was about here maybe, so I've knit almost half of the back in, like, I don't know, 2 weeks maybe, which for some people might not be that much knitting, but yeah. Here's this. I have this struggle with complicated knitting. I love it, and I love that I'll work on it while I'm catching up on podcasts, knitting podcasts, audio, visual, or on TV shows or whatever. But I've also been trying to make sure that I spend time each day reading, because sometimes when I have a really good book, that's really easy to do, but sometimes when I'm like trying to read a new genre or read more nonfiction, which I find my mind wanders from more easily, it's hard because I want to have a nice, easy project for those, but when I really want to be working on complicated knitting, I can't do that while I'm reading. So I'm just trying to figure out a balance with that. But yeah, that's my progress on this sweater. Oh, and this is the Stonecutter by Michelle Wong, and the yarn is Quince & Co. Lark. I'm definitely glad this is worsted weight. I cannot imagine doing a super heavily cabled pattern like this in like a fingering weight. Oh my word. I would die, I think. I could handle like a hat, mittens, scarf, okay, but the whole thing, oh my goodness. I love the texture of cables. I just love how squishy it is. And I know that means like cables use more yarn than plain stockinette, but I just love the heavy texture. This time of year, maybe not as much. I wouldn't wear it around this time of year as much, but I love it. I did want to talk about one knitting related acquisition. I don't know if you noticed, but I don't really talk about acquisitions on the podcast, like yarn that I buy. And that's not because I'm not buying yarn. I am, far from it. I buy yarn probably more than I should. I go through kicks sometimes I found that when I feel like I'm in a creative rut, or I feel like my projects have been just going on forever, but I don't want to just cast on something new just to cast on something new, I find that those are the times when I tend to buy yarn. Like, you get that instant gratification. Because I've been good about only buying yarn like with a purpose for the most part. Like, oh, I'll buy this. Like, oh, this yarn, I found this yarn on a Ravelry D-Stash page. What could I use it for? Oh, here's a project. Okay, now I'll buy it. So I've been better at that than I used to be. But you sort of get that instant creative rush and that energy without actually making something. Which I hadn't thought of that until I was reading through the Stash Less series that I think it's Felicia, I think that's her name, of the Craft Sessions blog and website and retreats and all that good stuff that she did. I'll link to that. But she wrote about that, how in her journey to try to stash less yarns and use what she had, that was what she realized, was that she would buy yarns to kind of get that creative buzz. Yeah. So I just find that I think it would be more useful to you if I talked about the yarns as I'm using them, and when I can actually have some more thoughts and opinions on it beyond, I thought this was pretty, or I thought it had a cool story behind it, and I love the color, so here it is. And I like watching those segments in other podcasts, but for me personally, I just think that's how I want to do it, because I want to be learning more about how different types of yarn behave. And so I think that, because I don't really know much about different kinds of wool, different types of fiber, I'm still learning so much. So I think to help me learn, that's what I want to be presenting when I talk about yarn. And also I find that sometimes if I'm in one of those creative slumps, watching a knitting podcast, it helps. Like, I get inspired, but then if they talk about this really cool yarn they bought, then I'm more tempted to go and buy yarn. So, yeah. But, and on a similar note, I don't buy many, like, knitting accessories, like project bags, or, like, I don't even know. What do people buy? I don't know. I don't buy much. But I had seen this bag that Gabby from Once Upon a Corgi had received from an Etsy shop as a prize for her Beauty and the Beast knit-along. It's still going on. I need to post pictures of my finished cowl in there. But anyway, it's still going on, but I didn't want to wait to see if I won. I started following the Etsy shop on Instagram. The Etsy shop is Misty Mountain Made, and saw that she was going to be having an update, I think a week ago maybe, and she had this bag. It's beautiful, and what I liked about it was that so many people make so many beautiful project bags. But what I liked about this was that it just seemed different because she has this embroidery. So the shop Here's her little tag, is Misty Mountain Made. And all of her bags have hand-stitched embroidery, which I just think is so cool. And the bag is beautiful. So this is what it looks like, this gray fabric, and then there's this gorgeous vintage-looking floral pattern. And she actually put the tag on with like a removable stitch marker, which I think is super cool. Really nice touch. And then this nice like watercolory green on the inside, and she even included a couple of tea bags, which I'm excited to try. They're kinds I hadn't tried before. This was the only one in the shop. She said it was a small update. She still has a Little Mermaid bag, a Moana bag, and a Mulan bag, if you are interested. I think she has a couple of Harry Potter bags as well. So again, I don't normally buy project bags because that's money I could be spending on yarn, but I think this one, it was worth it to me because I just love Beauty and the Beast, and it had this cool hand embroidery. And honestly, like, she's a fairly small Etsy shop, and so I always think it's cool to support people who have smaller shops who maybe are not as popular or well known or haven't been around as long, because obviously those people are popular for a reason. Like, their products are amazing, but I also like to, if I'm going to buy a project bag, support maybe a slightly smaller shop. So that was the acquisition that I wanted to share with you. One more thing that I've been working on is a little bit of embroidery. I had started this forever ago, a few months, but I pulled it out the other day. Don't have tons done on it, but this is from Clementine Patterns. This is their Rejoice in the Lord Always, and I brought the embroidery kit, not just the pattern. So this is what the final project will look like, hopefully. So the other day I pulled it out, if I can get that back in the little bag, and I added, I had part of the bird done, but I completed the bird, and then I did the tree trunk. And this was done in stem stitch, I believe it's called, which I'd never done before, and definitely, probably didn't do it right. And then I added a few blades of grass down here. So it was fun to just pull this out and work on it. I actually worked on it, my three younger sisters, we have introduced them, my older sister and I have introduced them to the world of musicals and Jane Austen movies. So they wanted to watch Emma the other night, so I pulled this out and worked on it a bit while we were watching Emma, the 2009 BBC 4-part series Emma, in case you were wondering. Just so much love for the story of Emma and for that version. It's just, my little sister, my 8-year-old little sister, in the end when Mr. Knightley is telling Emma that he loves her, she's sitting there, she goes, "My heart is split in two right down the middle." It was just so cute. I love watching them discover those things and those stories for the first time. And then my 11-year-old sister was like, we have the book, Emma, right? Because I kind of want to read it. She loves to read. We'll see how far she gets into it, but I love it. All right. So that's all for what I've actually been working on. And then I just thought I would share a few of my sort of favorite knitting book resources and just what I used when I started knitting. Now, not all of them, I don't own all of them. So a lot of them I get from the library. I got a lot of books out from my library when I was first learning, back before I discovered all of the resources that are on the internet, but probably also back before there were all those resources readily available on the internet. Because I started knitting, oh boy, I'm 21 now. I learned how to knit when I was 10. So I started knitting in 2006, which is right around the time that Ravelry was actually founded. They're celebrating, because it's been around for 10 years. So I've been knitting a little longer than Ravelry has been around. They just had I was just on Ravelry today, and they had their blog post about how they're celebrating 10 years. So where I learned my knitting techniques and found patterns, my older sister knit and so she would help me out. And I mean, my grandmother knit, but she lived too far away. She lives 5 to 6 hours away, so too far away to really be immediate assistance. And books from the library. The first book that I really used was the book Kids Knitting by Melanie Fallick. Which I still think is an amazing resource because it has patterns and it has lots of tutorials and really nice illustrations that just lay out how you can learn how to knit. So there's a pair of tube socks in there that I knit several pairs for my siblings. My brothers wore theirs as boot socks and wore them out. And so I just had fun experimenting with the patterns from that book and with the yarns that I had. And, you know, starting to learn like, oh, well, this yarn is thinner and it did this with that pattern and this size needle. So that definitely started me on my knitting journey. Another book that I got up from my library over and over and over again, I only ever knit maybe one thing from it, was The Yarn Girl's Guide to Beyond the Basics by Jordana Jacobs and Julie Carls. And I loved looking at it. I don't know what it was about that book, but I loved it. I think I loved how they had like little stories about how they'd come up with the patterns, because they are yarn shop owners in New York City, and so they had little stories, like all of their designs had like a name and like a little story of how they designed it, why they designed it. So those books, and I got a couple of their other books, they really inspired me to think beyond small projects. Yeah, so I just loved those books. And there were some other books I got out from my library, but I don't really remember many of them, so I obviously didn't knit a whole lot from them. Another book that was invaluable to me when I started knitting was Ann Budd's The Knitter's Handy Book of Patterns, because this just lays out very simply all the numbers that you need to knit mittens, hats, gloves, a sweater, scarves, socks, vests, and berets. I don't want to it's obviously it's a book, I'm not going to show you a ton. But so basically there's just these grids that lay out, okay, if this is your gauge and this is your size, then you just find your number in there that you need. So that was really helpful when I first decided that I wanted to learn how to knit mittens for my siblings, because it allowed me to just use the yarns and needles that I had. Because, I mean, I was 10, 11, 12 years old. I wasn't buying a lot of yarn and needles beyond what, like Walmart, AC Moore, and Michaels could offer. So it just allowed me to use the yarns that I had to learn, even just to learn what gauge was. Did I take proper gauge swatches? No, but I at least had a vague concept of what it was. And I still use this book. I also have her handy book of sweater patterns, which I have yet to use, but I like knowing that I have it, so that if I ever want to try to design my own sweater or adapt a sweater pattern, then I have that book as a resource. So yeah, The Knitter's Handy Book of Patterns. I've talked about this before. And then I also really loved the One Skein Wonder series. This is the only one I own. This is the sock yarn One Skein Wonders, but also just the other books that are published, the One Skein Wonders, and then 101 Designer One Skein Wonders. I love them because, I mean, they only took one skein, so they weren't massive projects. They were what I could handle, but they had a lot of different types of patterns or different concepts, and it's beautiful. Here, I'll try to just scroll through a few pages. Like there's beautiful pictures. It's very clearly laid out. And this is really the book that kind of inspired me to knit fingerless gloves. I made this pattern all the time. I made so many pairs of these. They're a cable and eyelet pattern, and I just loved working on them. And again, I learned a lot about yarn. Like, I knit a pair with a worsted weight yarn, and I knit a pair with maybe a fingering or sport weight yarn, and just seeing the difference. Oh, the one knit with the worsted weight yarns turned out to be super dense because I still used size 2 needles. I think it's size 2 is what it calls for. It calls for size 1. I either used size 1 or size 2 needles, and it came out super dense and not as, like, just could practically stand up on its own. And I also knit these woven fingerless gloves. Just so many gorgeous patterns that just inspired me to think outside of the other books that I had looked at. And I haven't knit anything from this in a long time, maybe a couple years, but I still will sometimes go back and look through it and knit from it. Oh, and this is actually, I knit a pair of side-to-side socks a couple years ago, which was super interesting. I had a self-striping yarn, and I did the side-to-side sock construction. I don't have them, I knit them for somebody else, so I don't know how they wore up, how they fit, but it was just super cool to think about socks like that, kind of outside the box. A lot of kind of outside the box designs and cool stitch patterns in this one particularly. This is the only one I own, so it's the one I've used the most. And then the last book I wanted to talk about is Sock Innovation by Cookie A. I will admit that there's a whole ton of information in the first part of this book about designing socks that I've honestly never really read. I know it's an amazing wealth of information, but I've just never really looked at it. So it just really pushes you to think beyond normal sock patterns. Cookie A's patterns are stunning, and she's not afraid of complicated stitch patterns, but also some of them are not too hard. Like, I knit this pair. I've knit, I think, 3 or 4 pairs of these socks where the stitch pattern like wraps around the foot, and I just love them. And looking through this, I definitely want to make more of these socks. Now, I think most of them work well in a single color yarn, so maybe I'll finally get some Quince & Co. sock yarn, or Quince & Co. fingering yarn, their Finch yarn, and knit some. Like these like super complicated cables, some have asymmetrical designs. Yeah, they're just stunning patterns. That definitely helped me to dive into the world of sock knitting, and it's also part of why I hadn't knit vanilla socks in so long, because I got this fairly early on in my knitting journey. I was in high school and I got this. I won it in a giveaway, along with some yarn that I used to make a pair of the socks. One of the first pairs of socks I ever really knit. So that's part of why I never really even thought about knitting vanilla socks for so long, because I had a resource like this with so many amazing, gorgeous patterns in it. And I don't use the knitting books I have as often as I would like, because it's so easy to just go in Ravelry and find patterns that are online. But I have my knitting patterns on my shelf, and sometimes I'll just pull them down and look at them, especially now that I've bought things like the Making magazine, or I have one issue of the By Hand serial, and different things like that have more than just knitting patterns in them. So I do have some beautiful books that I would like to use more often, maybe go there first if I need knitting inspiration, because I love how much is available on the internet, but it can also sort of lead you down a rabbit hole and you just keep clicking your mouse instead of clicking your needles. So, yeah, I thought that it would be fun to share with you some of the books that I have used in knitting, but also that would kind of help me to go back to books, because I love books and I love collecting books, but just sort of to go back and really take another look at some of the beautiful knitting books that I have. So yes, that is all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you all have a wonderful day and that you are learning from your mistakes and just having fun creating. Bye.